So apparently OGS has this thing where if a player abandons a whole bunch of games all at once, which I assume happens semi-often, it will actually annul those games and not give out any rating points. And I know this because this happened to me recently. I was playing against a One Dawn player, and according to the AI analysis afterwards, I was actually holding my own within a point or so, and that game actually got annulled, and OGS had this little message pop up saying, sorry, we got to do this to protect the integrity of our rating system, but when someone leaves a whole bunch of games all at once, we don't distribute any rating points for those games. As y'all know, if you leave a game or you abandon a game, resign, whatever, usually that's a forfeit and the other player will be treated as if they beat you. And I couldn't get any rating points out of this game, so on top of the disappointment of not being able to play out the full game, I was not able to get any rating points from it. I understand why OGS has to do this. Imagine very strong players just, I don't know, for whatever reason, they stop playing and basically they're giving out free rating points to the entire community, and it'll inflate the thing and it'll get all messy and ranks won't mean what they are supposed to mean. So I totally get why OGS did this, but it is a bit of a bummer when I was having a good game against a strong player. Welcome to Starpoint, the show about Go for Go fans away from the board. And on the coattails of last week's topic about psychological barriers and things that you got to do outside of studying, I touched briefly on this subject that we're going to talk about today, which is stuff that Go teachers get wrong. Now, this isn't directed at anyone specific, but over the years, I've seen many people teach and try to teach, whether it's on YouTube or in person or friends or actual teachers that I've interacted with. I've seen a lot of things happen, and I think, it's time to turn the tables. It's time for the student to become the teacher and tell the teacher, hey, this isn't effective as a teaching method. All in jest, but I do think there are some things that I can say about the way people teach Go may not always be the most productive way. And if you spin it another way, this might just be things that Go teachers should do. And in fact, a lot of these tips I think Go teachers do, but not all of them. So whatever way you want to spin it. And I think to get started, the first thing I think that many teachers don't do is a diagnosis phase. A lot of teachers, they just jump right into just spewing their knowledge about the game without fully understanding where the student is at. Actually, this is something that one of my teachers did do, at least somewhat, by asking me a whole bunch of questions about what I thought, right? Instead of just looking at my game and telling me, oh, this is wrong because this and this and this, they wanted to make sure where my misunderstanding was, and they gave me a situation on the board and said, hey, what do you think is good or bad about this move, or is there something wrong with this move at all? Because oftentimes when a student has a game and then they played a game and they have a move that maybe not such a great move, that student may very well know that's not a good move. And so when the teacher goes in and sees that move, sees that it's a bad move, that teacher should verify the student does not know that that's a bad move. Sometimes you just get in the heat of the moment and you play a bad move. Everybody plays bad moves that they know they shouldn't play from time to time. And when the teacher goes in and tries to explain for an hour why that move is bad, when the student has known all along, that's a waste of time. That's a waste of the teacher's time. That's a waste of the student's time. So it's important for the teacher to say, hey, let's really see if they understand this or if this was just a silly mistake. I think even more diagnosis and more questions asked of the student is better to get a true understanding of where the student's, an understanding of where the student's understanding is advantageous. But even just a preliminary questioning of the student's thought process, I think, is an absolutely necessary step for any teacher. And it's not so good, I think, when the teacher just starts saying, this is how you play Go, and this is what you do, and this is what you do, instead of diagnosing the problem first. Oftentimes, this can be done, this can be done a number of ways, right? You can play a teaching game to just kind of see, feel out where the student is in terms of understanding. You could look at their SGFs, talk about it, and say, like, hey, does this make sense to you? I like it. I always like it when the teacher asks questions like, what was the idea behind this move? And usually the student will say something like, I don't know, I just thought it was Sente or something very vague. So it's also kind of up to the student to be able to articulate their own understanding as well. And then the next thing I want to talk about for what Go teachers get wrong, and this is really the meat of what I think Go teachers often get wrong. I think this is the most common issue. Let me paint a picture here for you guys. A teacher is giving a little lecture about moves that you should be playing and doing a game review. And the teacher says, for here, you should play this move or this move because this is too aggressive and this is a necessary move, yada, yada, yada. And then oftentimes in this lecture, the student will say something like, oh, what about this move? Why wouldn't you consider this one? Or would you consider this move? This is one of the moves that I would think of. And the teacher's response to this question will most likely be something like, well, they'll either brush it off and say, oh, no, that's terrible. Don't play that move. That's, or they'll take some time and seriously try to figure out why they would or wouldn't play that move. And they'll say, let me consider that. Because Go is a very complicated game. And when a student says, hey, what about this move? It's usually not just straight up wrong. Teacher may say, hey, yeah, you can play that move. But the problem I have here is when the teacher takes that move and figures it out by reading a sequence in their head and says, oh, okay, well, if you play here, then black has this move, which means that white has this here, and then black has this, and then you play here, 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 and then you have a Hane here, and then Atari here. And then they'll basically play 20 moves of a sequence out, and they've lost the student. They've completely lost the student, and they'll just kind of think out loud on the board, and that will be their answer. And I take issue with that because I don't think that is a productive approach to learning how to play better in Go. For the teacher to play out a sequence that the student would never dream of. In fact, I would say that even between strong players, a lot of them will have very different ideas based on a similar situation. So I don't think this is necessarily a teaching session at this point, rather than just a fun, what would you say, exposition of the moves that this student has considered. Or maybe, on the other hand, instead of playing too many moves to illustrate their point that just is not useful in any way for the future, they will just look at the move and say, oh yeah, you can't play that because of this move. And then they'll show you a killing move or something like that. And they'll just kind of let it sit there, and the student will go, I see. Anyway, and then they'll move on. So I see this as a very common happening between student and teacher interactions, where the student will ask why on a Go board, and the teacher will find out why, right? Because it's presumably their job as a teacher to explain why when the student asks why, and they'll explain through the Go board, like 30 moves or one move even. And then the student will be like, I see, aha, I see, right? Because like you can't argue, right? Like the teacher is probably right about that explanation. But that whole exchange, I don't know if that's the most productive thing that you can do to improve the student's game in Go. And this is something that I've found, I mentioned Go Inside's channel a lot, and it's for good reason. She has a lot of good tips, and I do revisit her videos quite a bit. And one of the videos that she has up, she expresses frustration teaching Western players. She's a Korean professional, and she emphasizes that a lot of Western folks, they ask why. And she says, stop asking me why. And that's her video. She's basically saying, don't ask me why, because you know why? I don't know why. She, as a pro, doesn't know why she knows what moves to play. And so for her to sit there and figure out why, that's not the point. The point is recognizing this as a good move or this as a bad move. I'm also reminded of that Kageyama lesson that I mentioned during one of the episodes I had with Sean, where there was a chapter and Kageyama says, hey, look at this position. This is a good position for black, and it's a terrible position for white. If you disagree, just keep telling yourself the same thing over and over again, that it's good for black, it's good for black, it's good for black. Notice how Kageyama does not give you 30 examples of why this wall of influence is so great and give you all these different scenarios that come up after that. He just knows that you have to sink this into your intuition. So I think there's this difficult thing about Go where it is a very intuitive game and yet a very rational game. And people focus a little too much on the rational sometimes, and they go deep into just reasoning things out. And that reasoning out, it's a good skill to have, but I don't think it's always applicable for teaching. Okay, next thing that I think that the teachers can do to improve their process. And, I'm not a teacher. I don't have teaching experience other than some casual on the side because first of all, I'm not that strong. So there's not that many people to teach. And then on the other hand, a lot of people, like people who are weaker than me often are not super passionate about Go, and they don't want to, take the time to become a student of mine. But that aside, I'm going to try to go over all my thoughts and see if any of these tips kind of help nudge people in the right direction when it comes to teaching, or at least stimulate the ideas behind teaching and seeing if that will help. So, just a little side there. But the next thing I want to talk about is prioritization. I think it's very easy to waste time on low priority things. And I'm going to go back to this other teacher. This is also a thing that I've seen another teacher do, which is characterize the weights of mistakes by saying this is a $5 mistake, this is a $50 mistake, and this is a $1 million mistake. And that's a really great way to visualize what I mean by prioritization. When you play a game, there are different levels of mistakes. Sometimes you make a mistake and it's not that bad. It's not the worst mistake to make. You may both understand that it's a mistake. It may be easy to understand, but honestly, maybe it cost you a couple points. On the other hand, if you are blind to the fact that your heart is about to be ripped out of your body, to be graphic here, then that is something you need to address right away. If you are playing a game and you're about to lose 30 stones and you need to connect your stones up to another group and you just don't see it, you just don't understand why you need to connect, and then that is the first thing that you need to work on in order to rank up, right? It makes a lot of sense. So from a teacher's perspective, you need to make use of the right amount of time for the right amount of mistakes. If you start getting carried away with little tit for tat endgame moves, endgame is important, but you can get caught up in little things. I think one of the biggest things actually, maybe opposite of Endgame, that I see a lot of people get caught up, students and teachers, is Joseki. When they are reviewing the game, Joseki is such a difficult to understand part of the game. And when you start straying from the Joseki main branches and you start considering certain things, it's so easy to get sidetracked. You see the student kind of wonder about what to do from here and say, oh, what about this? What about if you just extend? Da 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 da. And then the teacher will also get invested and they'll get very interested. That's a very interesting point. Is this, maybe you can cover here. That's cool, right? And they'll get really into it. And that's great for social interaction. But if you're trying to be efficient about learning from its teacher to student, transfer of skills and knowledge, that's oftentimes not going to be the best way to spend your time, to just be spending an hour on optimizing Joseki moves that you're never going to play. It's an interesting thing, and I'm sure it will help make you stronger. But it's just, I don't know. I think a lot of people get sidetracked and they don't focus on the super duper weak points that a student may have in their game. And then the other side of that is the teacher will spend a little too much time on things that students will gain through experience. Like, it'll be a lot easier for them to gain through experience this type of thing rather than the teacher trying to explain, like, oh yeah, let's talk about why we need to Hana here, why we need to do this here. There's a lot of information in Go that you pick up just by playing, and I think it's important for a teacher to understand, oh, this isn't the type of thing that I need to transfer my own knowledge through, but I need to prescribe a kind of practice that will allow my student to absorb this knowledge. And that's something I will also talk a little bit more about later. The next thing, and I also touched on this last week with Eric's email, is the teacher only does game reviews. They basically just look at your SGF, they click through and basically critique the game, which is, it's a good thing to do, and it makes sense for a teacher to do that and analyze the game from top to bottom. Hey, here's how you did in the opening. These are the mistakes you made in the middle game, and these are the mistakes you made in the end game. And so basically what you end up with when you do that is you end up with a laundry list of things to work on for your next game. Everything from, hey, memorize this Joseki, to do this amount of life and death problems and all that stuff, and you just like kind of review each point of the game that was important. The problem with that is that it's a static SGF, and there's no analysis of the underlying psychology. There's no analysis of what the student was trying to do at each point, what the student's mentality was at each point of the game. And just critiquing the moves, it's a little dry, and it's almost like a textbook for everyone to learn from, rather than a special lesson geared towards the student. And so to ameliorate that, what I want to talk about next is the coaching aspect. And I talked about this as well last week, but the thing is, there's not much coaching done in the Go world, I feel. There's a lot of knowledge transfer, and a lot of this is the right move, this is the wrong move, this is how you do this is how not to do this. But I find that a lot of Go teachers, they don't give enough prescription for training, giving exercises, setting clear goals for the student, giving homework, basically, right? Why are we not giving homework to our students as Go teachers? Maybe because we're adults and we don't want homework, and we won't do homework even if we're told we're done with our homework. We've done it. Been through the ringer of school, and we don't want to do any homework, and we're all kind of too lazy to do it. But honestly, if a teacher told me hey, you got to finish this by next week, I would probably listen. I would probably, because, something I want to do is improve at Go, and I would not want to blame myself and the fact that I was failing to complete what the teacher told me to do to improve. And so I think it's important for teachers, just as it's important for them to tell us, hey, this is the right Joseki for this situation because you're using your influence more productively. It's important for them to say, I want you to, look at 10 pro games and play the first 20 moves, or, read through the first 20 moves, evaluate where the influence spots are and where the territory spots are, or something like that, right? Very concrete and very real. That's something real that you can do, not just, for the future, think more about influence. That's too vague, right? You can say something like, hey, play 10 games this week. I just want you to play 10 games this week. I just want you to play more games. That can be a prescription. Or what about try to tanuki at least 5 times in your next game? Or what about, here's a set of problems that I think would benefit you. Here you go. I think you should finish this by next week. Memorize this Joseki and this Joseki. I'm going to quiz you next week. I feel like this is very, common sense, right? If you think about teaching, this is what teaching sounds like. A teacher will analyze their students' knowledge. They'll try to transfer as much knowledge as they can, and then they'll walk that student through by giving them exercises and homework and practical things to do. One of the most valuable things I found one of the teachers that I had gave me was they looked at how I was playing and noticed, and so this is kind of like a condensed version of my whole episode here, but they noticed that I played pseudo Tsujis. I had a tendency to play moves that looked cool, and a little forceful, right? A little forceful, a little too quickly, a little too often. And so his advice was, hey, why don't you go look through pro games? See how often sometimes pros do play special moves, but they don't play special moves all the time. So why don't you go through a whole bunch of pro games? You don't have to pay attention to them. You don't have to read everything. Just lightly go through them and see how often they play these special moves. And you know what? That actually helped me a lot. And I went through and I noticed, hey, you know what? I am noticing a lot of these moves that these pros play are super calm. They don't really do these fancy attachments and, spinorama Ataris all the time like I'm trying to do. I've realized about myself that I was trying to juice every situation so much that it was hindering my game. And so that in and of itself was something that this teacher was, they were diagnosing my condition by looking at a large number of my games and noticing a pattern that I had, and then prescribing a solution. Hey, take notice, look through these pro games. Instead of just saying, oh, yeah, stop playing those moves, okay? And just let's move on, right? That obviously might help a little bit, but the fact that he gave me something to do about it and to actually soak up that knowledge was really great. So, all in all, a teacher should not only give knowledge, but advise on how to acquire that knowledge. I'll give you one example of that being true and why the role of a teacher should be more than just transferring of knowledge. This is something I always advise people. I've been playing guitar for quite a long time. And whenever somebody asks me whether they should get a teacher, and whether I got a teacher, I tell them that, yeah, I did. I got taught guitar by a teacher for several months, and then I was on my way on my own. And what I always tell them is that, all the stuff that you need to know in order to play guitar, it's online. You can find it on YouTube, and it's even more than when I started. When I started, like, there's way more resources out there. online on YouTube. You can look up guitar tabs. You could look up, there's so many websites and teaching services out there. You can really self-teach quite effectively. However, one thing that you're going to be missing is this person to guide you and keep you accountable and notice and fix and adjust your flight pattern while you are learning. It's really hard to describe, but it's very beneficial just to have somebody watch you. Isn't it weird that we perform differently when someone's watching versus not? And I don't know how much you're going to relate to this, but I found that even when I'm playing a game of Go or, doing anything really, and someone of a higher level is watching me, I somehow play better. I do better. It's like it activates a part of my brain, like this higher consciousness, like, oh, somebody who knows what they're doing is out there and they're like observing this. And I feel my own self expanding into that and trying the best I can to do the best that I can in that situation. Kind of like when I first started learning guitar, one of the challenges, one of the hurdles you got to get over is learning how to play bar chords. That F chord, it hurts. It hurts your fingers quite a lot. And I know that if I tried to learn that thing on my own, I would probably just be like, oh, that hurts, I give up. But the fact that I had to sit there for like 30 minutes to an hour with my teacher and he was like, okay, now play the chord. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try the best I can. This guy's watching me and even though it hurts, I'm going to dig my fingers in and really give him the best that I can because he can do it so well. He knows what it's supposed to sound like, and I don't want to let him down. So I'm going to try my best. And that really worked. The fact that I was trying to meet somebody's expectations in that way, I think really helped on my journey. So what I tell people in guitar, and I think this is probably true in Go, and I wish I could find someone more like that in Go that I could meet more regularly and in person, although that's pretty difficult, especially now that I'm an adult with responsibilities. Just to have somebody mentor you that way, I think is very valuable and very beneficial. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of what Go teachers get wrong, and this isn't just for professional teachers, this is for anyone who tries to teach anyone anything at Go, is overconfidence. A lot of people, a lot of Go players, just because they're a few ranks higher than another player, will treat their own word as gospel while the student also treats that as gospel. I remember looking at a random OGS game, and it was between like a 18Q player with like a 23Q player, something like that. And there was a chat going on, and the 18Q player says, "Don't play this move. Yeah, don't capture that stone. Yeah, notice how I'm playing the big moves." And I'm just thinking to myself, not exactly, right? I was quite a few ranks higher than that, and I was thinking, well, that move is actually quite big. It's a Panuki in the middle of the board, and I think you should capture that stone. But it was the blind leading the blind. And this doesn't just happen at the DDK level. This happens at every level, even at the Dan level. Sometimes I submit games to, there's a website called gokibitz.com where you can submit games for reviews. That's gokibitz.com if you're interested. And I will say, hey, this is my game. If you're stronger than me, let me know what you think. And then some stronger players will start commenting and fighting each other because one player says, oh, this is terrible, don't do this. And then the other player who's stronger says, well, don't tell them not to do this. I think this is actually quite good. And they'll start just debating over that. And so take it with a grain of salt, especially if you don't know them, especially if they're not very much higher in rank than you. A lot of people are very overconfident with their moves, and I'm not sure what the cure to that is. I think that as teachers, we need to be a little conservative. I try to be as conservative as possible when I'm teaching. I'm quite afraid to say, oh, this is right, this is wrong. But I would probably lean towards the coaching, like, hey, let's think about why we take bases and let's really understand that concept. I don't know. I think that's just something I see a lot, the overconfidence and blatantly wrong or subjective advice as concrete knowledge. And yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people can try to watch out for in their teaching. Go is a difficult game to learn, and it's arguably a more difficult game to teach. I honestly don't know how to learn Go, and I don't know how to teach Go, and it's very difficult, but somehow the effort that we put into it, whether it's teaching or learning, it somehow at some point pays off in a way, and we do end up learning, and it's kind of a miracle that happens, but I don't know why, but I feel like there are things that we can try to think about and improve in our learning and teaching process, and I hope the things that I went over can maybe inspire some people to tighten up their teaching game, or if you're a student, if you're someone trying to learn from a teacher, maybe you can kind of see what kind of advice you should be seeking from a teacher. Hopefully it was a thoughtful discussion for you. And now it's time for the DDK Advice Corner. I want to say today's DDK advice would be evaluation after intuition, or evaluate after intuiting. So Go is a very intuitive game, which is why it's so difficult to teach. And intuitive moves are necessary, and they're great. And we need to use our intuition to suss out the moves that we want to consider. But once we consider those moves, don't just play them, evaluate. And that's, maybe you could translate that plainly to read, right? Look at the moves that you're supposing, what your mind and body is trying to do. Question it, evaluate it with questions. Why am I doing this? Does this actually accomplish what I want to accomplish? And am I right in wanting to do this? It's very important not to just use your intuition for every move, but actually think about your moves. I think a lot of people maybe think too much about their moves, but a lot of people also just don't think enough about their moves. And today's DDK Advice Corner, after you intuit a move, make sure you evaluate it and think about it, question it until you find a better move or you find that it's the right move. And now it's time for some listener mail. DJ74033 writes, Carcassonne is my go-to game I play with friends who like more luck-based games. There's enough strategy for me to enjoy it, but it isn't too heavy. I just found a neighbor who had played Go some 20 years ago, though had since stopped. He still had a 9x9 board though to teach his children on. Was able to play on a 9x9 for the first time and had a great time. I think he is going to retake his interest in the game too. Happy to have someone around my skill level to play with. Thanks for writing in, DJ, and that's so cool. I love every time I mention something off the cuff, like Carcassonne, and someone writes in saying that they also enjoy that. And honestly, yes, it is something about luck thrown into a game makes it just more casual, more fun, and Carcassonne has that random tile draw effect, and it's definitely kind of takes some pressure off like the seriousness of Go, where everything is on you. And then it's awesome that you found a neighbor who plays Go. That's incredible. I feel like it's such a blessing to find someone randomly who plays Go, because it's just not that common. And the fact that you guys can play now and this person wants to rekindle their interest in Go, quite a magical thing. Thanks for writing in and sharing, DJ. And then Sadaharu writes, I think Go is a beautiful game because it is the only game that can be viewed as both an art and a sport. Nowadays, the trend seems to be heading towards Go as a sport, which is in itself is not a bad thing. There is still some art component left, but it seems to be getting less as everyone is imitating AI. On another note, I think it depends on who your target audience is too. If your target audience likes arts, then it's better to market Go as an art. And if they like sports or competitive games, then it's better to market Go as a sport. Thanks for writing in again, Sadaharu. I noticed that the way they characterize Go when it was popular in Japan was that it's an art form. And then when the Koreans came in and started dominating the scene, a lot of people said, oh, the Koreans, they view it more as a sport, which is why they kind of threw away a lot of the excess aesthetic stuff and just kind of go for the dirty fighting from the get-go. And I do like considering it as both. And it's also, like, it depends on your level too, right? Because at amateur level, it can really go both ways and really just be a specific personality difference. When I play, I feel like I want to bring more of my art self into it, but I primarily go into it like a sport. I know that I can't really like suppress that desire to win, and I will kind of cut as many corners as I can to, not to make a Go pun, but to win the game. And that's really where my mentality's at when I play. But I feel like it would benefit my game to actually bring in more of an artful approach. And then I really like your point about marketing, because that's another thing that I think if we want to spread Go as a game, we have to learn like what our audience likes and what would really make it captivating to them. I think a lot of people are intimidated by the sports side of it, actually. They just see that they'll never get any good at the game. They never think that they can win against anyone who's had any experience with the game. But maybe if we market it more as an art, like, hey, this isn't just about winning. This is about the experience of sharing this board and this creation that you have together. Maybe that's a more appealing way to appeal to a lot of the people who are intimidated by Go. And I think that's an interesting topic as well. Thanks for writing in, Sadaharu. Question of this week is, what has your experience been with Go teachers? What do you think they do wrong? What do you think they do right? What advice would you have for them if you're a student? And if you're a teacher with a lot of experience, did the stuff I talk about resonate with you? Were there anything that you disagreed with? Or is there any specific thing that you feel I left out? I'd love to know and love to hear from all of you. So if you want to share your thoughts on this question, or you just have a story to share about Go, or have a question you want to ask me, comment on YouTube or the Reddit post for this episode, or you can email me directly at startpointpaduk@gmail.com. That's startpointbaduk@gmail.com. And if you're a YouTube listener, I would love it if you liked and subscribed. And if you're a podcast listener, reviews and ratings also help. A very special thank you to Jeffrey H., James B., and John M. for supporting Starpoint. And you know what kind of animal likes to play Go? What kind of animal likes to play Go? Sheep, but they like to call it Baduk. Thanks for listening. Keep playing Go.